I tend to be kind of a lightning rod kind of a preacher. I tend to push, and I don't apologize for that. I don't know that you're worth much if you come to church and just get what you want to hear. But at the same time, at least in my life, you have to slow down at times. And I'm not going to say that all sermons are not practical, but I've been through a lot. In fact, I've preached a bunch that just, they kind of tugged at your hearts. And when the time you were over, you're thinking, yeah, I kind of liked what he said. But as far as changing you, making you into something different, it didn't really do that. And then there are other sermons that can kind of slap you in the face and step on your toes. And by the time you're going out, you just feel so bludgeoned that you don't really have anything left to apply it. You know, those guys have been through those sermons too, preached a bunch of them. This sermon's not going to be either one of those, God willing. I hope that this sermon would just be practical in the sense that you can apply it, and I doubt anybody's going to leave here feeling mad at me or wanting to give me high fives at the back. I think it's just going to be one of those that I think will be just dirt practical, and I like going there. Especially when it's been a tough summer and I'm tired and I just need somebody to give me some stuff that's kind of easy to see. I'm actually going to have 4 points. You know me as well as anybody in the country. You know me. I'm a 3-point kind of preacher, but when the Lord provides 4, you go with the Lord, right? And so that's what we'll do. You'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner the WWJD. That's the key to this sermon. That's the key. But before I go there, let me just share with you why we're going to go there this morning. Some of what I've already said played into this, but while I've been on the road this summer and working with all the kids and seeing various things swirl about me, and I tend to be kind of a selfish kind of fella. It's all about Sonny Chow's a lot of times in my life. But there are certain people in my life that are hugely special to me, and because they're in my context, it bothers me when they're bothered, and you happen to be those people. And as I have traversed the summer, I've noticed that there's a lot of stuff that's going on in our lives right now. There's a lot of stress that's happening. Some of us feel like that we just can't work another hour and still stay on our feet. That's happening, our people. There are financial issues right now, our people, who are struggling to know how they're going to get that particular bill paid. Our people facing some difficult decisions with regards to their health, surgeries upcoming, or just not long ago had them, our people. Family issues, struggles, conflict within the home that's not being worked out, our people. We're probably a pretty good cross-section of America, but when it comes to my people, my folks, as I like to call you, it weighs on my heart. And as I was laying in my bed a couple nights ago and thinking through the summer and thinking through what I've been hearing about our folks and some of the stuff that we are enduring here at our congregation, this title popped into my head. Overwhelmed and sinking fast. I felt that this summer, personally, and there are some of you who are present tense feeling it right now. What's next? How could I possibly endure another thing? What in the world, Lord, are you doing with me right now? Overwhelmed and sinking fast. How do we face it? How do we face that kind of stress? I'm going to say the word face again because that's going to be the 4 points this morning. How do you face overwhelming things such as that? Well, as I take you to this particular book, Matthew 14, and then we'll skip to chapter 26. And again, we're not going to really read anything except I want to share with you 2 very, very, very stressful moments in the life of Jesus. You know the 26. Chapter 26, we're going to go to the garden. And he is going to sweat, as it were, drops of blood because he realized what's coming on the horizon. That he is going to be beat to a pulp. He is going to have to drag his cross halfway up Golgotha. He is going to be nailed to it. He's going to hang there for 6+ hours. He's going to be in horrible agony and pain, the most of which will climax when he has to say, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? In the middle of all of this stress, and now I've got to be alone in it all. Overwhelmed and sinking fast. It's the Matthew 14 passage, however, that you are also familiar with, but you're thinking to yourself, what could be in that story? Let me summarize it real quickly so that we can draw these four very practical points from the life of Christ and apply them to our own scenarios. In Matthew chapter 14, Jesus has just heard that John the Baptist has been beheaded. If you pedal back in the context, you'll read how that takes place. John the Baptist was a preacher who said things that people didn't like. And when they didn't like him, they dismissed him. And they walked off and left him behind. Or in this case, when they had enough power to do so, they imprisoned him. And then in the perverted act of a young girl dancing, prompted by her mom, when she pleases the king to request the head of John the Baptist on a platter, that's what takes place. And so John the Baptist, the greatest of all the Old Testament characters, according to the words of Jesus, John the Baptist, because folks didn't like his preaching, had his head cut off and displayed for the masses. And this upsets Christ. And I think it upsets him for a lot of reasons. Number one, he's family. Number two, he's the guy who baptized Jesus, prompted the ministry in a sense. John the Baptist was the one who basically laid the path so that Jesus could come along and do the things that he needed to do. But maybe the greatest one of all is Jesus could see that 3 years from now, he would be in a similar situation. That the masses were going to turn on him too. And he would be nailed to the old wooden cross. And perhaps one of the things that upset him the most when he saw what was taking place was that he recognized that he had about 3 years left to do his job, and yet every moment of every day, no doubt, it haunted him what was coming down the path in Matthew chapter 26. Jesus was overwhelmed through his entire ministry. He had plenty of things to be overwhelmed by and sinking fast. I don't know that he did this, but I certainly would have if I had been him. It would have been part of my calendar. Jesus understood how this thing was playing out. He knew that as he crossed into the second year of his ministry, that he only had 1 year left. He surely understood when he got to that 6-month period, 6 months left, and I'll go to the cross. Jesus recognized the final week. He understood what was happening when they were laying everything in front of him, the palm leaves and their clothing and all of those things, and he's coming in, the pomp and the parade of a conquering king, yet he recognizes that at the end of the week, many of those same people are going to be shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." He recognized the instability of the human heart. He knew that he had less than a week left. He knew that night, as he sat at the table when he instituted the Lord's Supper, that there was somebody sitting at that table who would betray him. He knew that. He recognized that he was just within hours of them beating him, senseless almost. He goes to the garden in Matthew 26 and he kneels and he prays because he is overwhelmed and sinking fast. Going back to Matthew 14, after hearing that John the Baptist, his cousin, the one who baptized him, initiated his ministry, hearing that he has been killed in such a horrible manner, his head paraded in front of the king's people, his heart is heavy. And he gets in a boat. But when he gets out the boat, guess who's waiting on him? A crowd of people who need his attention. He's already emotionally exhausted from all that he sees that has happened to his friend and is no doubt going to happen to him throughout his ministry and ultimately the cross. He's emotionally exhausted. But he gets out the boat and he sees folks who needs him. And so you know what he does? He goes about taking care of the people because that's what Jesus does. 5,000 of them needed feeding. The disciples say, "Listen, we're out in a remote place, just send them away." Jesus says, "You can take care of this," but they don't. It again falls back in the lap of the master. And so he feeds the 5,000. At the end of this time, he's talked to the children. He's hugged the mamas. He's shook hands with the fathers. He's fed everybody in the crowd. At the end of this time, he is not only emotionally exhausted from what he knows happened to his friend John the Baptist, but now he's physically exhausted, dealing with 5,000 plus. And it says that he takes the disciples, put them in the boat, and he says, "You go on. I need some time." And then it tells us that he dismissed the crowd. It doesn't give us much more than that except to say that he dismissed the crowd. Now, I don't know how crowds worked back in the day of Jesus, but I know what it's like to dismiss this crowd. Y'all just don't go home. And that's such a good thing. I'm not at all complaining. I hope it always is that way. But when you say dismiss the crowd, don't think that he just kind of gives a wave and heads up into the mountains. There's still children to be kissed. There's women who need to be talked to because they're struggling with whatever it may be. There are men who need counseling. No doubt when it says he dismissed the crowd, this took time. So we've got John the Baptist, emotional strain. Feeding the 5,000, physical strain. Dismissing the audience, it all comes together. Jesus is bone tired. So what's he going to do? Because he's overwhelmed and sinking fast. 4 things I find from the life of Christ that are so practical. You need them, and I need them. Number 1, the first thing he does in both of these instances is he focuses on God, not himself. That seems so backward given modern day psychology. And maybe you can see from the results we're having with modern day psychology in our world today that we ought to rethink this thing. One of the first things that will often be told to a person who's struggling with depression is you're just not spending enough time thinking about yourself. You need to have more me time. But that doesn't seem to be the thing that Jesus applied. Now there is certainly a me moment in the fact that he needs to get off by himself, but notice the focus. The focus was, I need to be with who? The Creator. Now I'm going to say something here, you can take it whichever way you want, but I think it's true. The more God time you got, the less me time you'll need. If we'll start counseling people struggling with depression and other things to spend more time with God, they'll take less focus on themselves. And the reason that makes sense is because, look, you're already in it. If you could have solved it, you probably would have. Where do you need to spend some time? You need to spend some time with the being who created you, who put the thing together. And so I would suggest to you, number 1, that when you find in both of these cases Jesus going off by himself, it wasn't so much about him as it was about the Creator. I need to be with my Father. Now, in Jesus' case, obviously, God did not create him, except in the sense that through the combination of him, the Holy Spirit, and God the Father, there was an implantation, if you will, into the womb of Mary. And so, in some sense, I guess you could call that somewhat of a creative moment. I get it, he's not the creator for Jesus like he's the creator for us, but he certainly did function, that is God the Father. He did function as the catalyst, the anchor point that got Jesus through all these horribly difficult moments. And so I suggest to you the F in FACE has to do with focus. Are you overwhelmed? Do you feel like you just can't go another day? You need to go to the Creator. You need to spend time with He who made you. Which really kind of ties us into the second point. I want you to notice that Jesus was alone but not on vacation. Now, trust me, I have nothing against vacations. In fact, I'm hoping to take one here in a couple weeks because there's certainly purpose in vacation. There's a purpose in chilling, etc. But let's just be honest. Vacations often are just another form of busy time, aren't they? You got limited number of days, right? And so we're going to run to this, we're going to run to that, we got to get it all in, and we got to get home on time, and generally we're getting home late the night before I got to go back to work. I'm not against vacation, so please don't take that home with you. But what I am saying is in this case, when you're overwhelmed and sinking fast, the point is you need to be alone with your Creator. So often we assume that when we're just overwhelmed by everything, if I could just get away, if I could pack up and go to Disney World, if I could go to the beach, if I could rent a whatever, and all those things could probably be good and probably satisfying in many, but that's not what's happening here in Jesus' case. And I'm not sure I can preach this as a gospel, but I would suggest you think about it. Find me the passage in all the descriptions of Jesus that it talks about him taking a vacation. I'm not saying that means you can't, but what I am saying is that in the midst of these overwhelming moments, what he does is he seeks aloneness with God. I think that if there were two words, I could get every person, if I could get every person to, I don't know, blow it up on a big piece of paper, cross-stitch it, do whatever, and put it in their home to change things radically, it would be these two words: be still. And you know my summers. I'm probably the last guy to be talking this way from this pulpit. But we need more be still time. I know it's one of the reasons that I treasure my wife so much. She has created a scenario that I can go into with regularity that is nothing but stillness, calmness. And I need that. Jesus needed that. I believe that when he departed and went up into the mountain to be alone, notice that he sent his closest friends away. They're out in the boat. He's gone up there by himself so that he can be with it. He needs to be still. You can do so many good things at such a rapid pace that you forget the most important thing. Are you overwhelmed and sinking fast? Number one, focus in the right direction. It's not about you. It's about your need to be with the Creator. Number two, get alone with him. I'm not even talking about taking your wife or your husband. Get alone with the Creator. Find you a spot where you can have an extended time, a period in his presence. The third thing I see Jesus doing in these difficult times is he's actually communicating. He will say to his folks in 14 that I need to go and pray. He will literally demonstrate to his folks in 26 how to go about that prayer. I don't think there's anything wrong with unloading. There are times when I literally curl up on the couch with my head in the lap of Cindy and I just unload. And I think there is some healthiness to that. But I think it is much more healthy when you recognize that in times of being overwhelmed, when you go to be with your Creator, it needs to be a two-way street. It's not just you dumping on God. It's you listening for what God is saying because of what you just dumped on him. When prayer becomes interactive, life becomes dynamic. I've never had a wee small voice in my ear. I've never had an angel show up and tap me on the shoulder. I'm not saying those things can't happen. I'm just saying it's never happened to me. But I have most definitely, and some of you in this room can say and nod your head that you have too. I have most definitely been in situations where in the midst of my prayer, something came to my heart. A cleansing flushed over me. A moment of just total peace rushed beside me. And I thought to myself, that could be nothing else but God. You been there? May I suggest to you that prayer needs to be viewed as more than just me dumping on God. I need to ask, what are you saying, Father? What do you mean by that? Share a personal, and then I'll move to my last point. I guess it was Friday. Right here. Baptized a young lady, one of our masters, good girl. But this particular young lady, she's just over the top analytical. She's brilliant. But if you ever play a game, this young lady, after all the things have been said and everybody's satisfied, it seems, in the room with all the rules and all that, she's going to have a question because that's just the way she operates. At first, I kind of was concerned about it. In fact, it frustrated me a little bit until I began to get to know her better and began to realize not only how brilliant she is, but the processes that she uses in order to get from A to B. But as we were talking through this decision that she was making, the only reason this sweet young lady had not been baptized earlier, in fact, I talked to her a year ago about the subject matter, is she was over-processing. She was concerned that she wouldn't be able to live up to the commitment she was making. And And that was it. Well, what if I mess up? What if, next year? What if, and I shared with her that God, your Father, wants to be just that. He doesn't want to be some kind of stoic, disconnected, divine being that's way out there somewhere. He wants to actually communicate with you. He wants to have an interaction with you. And I shared with her the need to just let go and let God. You can't figure it all out, sweetheart. I get it. There's a gazillion possible scenarios in the future, but you're not there, my dear. You're here right now. What are you going to do with it? And I could see as she cried at length, I could see that she was beginning to recognize that in her approach to life, being over the top analytical, that sometimes there comes a moment when you just got to let God have it. Just give it up and let Him. You see the communication in that? That day she didn't just dump on God. Well, she dumped on God. But she didn't just dump on God all the stuff that she's got. She also communicated with Him. And in the communicative process, she received something from God, just like she was giving God all of her problems. And I told her, I said, you've got to let it go. For your own sanity. For the sake of God's glory. You've got to let it go. Which leads me to my last point. And it's, for me at least, the hardest one of all, because I am a procrastinator. But the fourth thing I see Jesus doing is He engaged whatever it was that was overwhelming Him. He engaged it. He didn't procrastinate. In both of those stories, let's go to the 26 first. In 26, at the end, in the garden, he's got his prayer time, folks sleeping, all that kind of stuff. He finally, what's he do? He gets up and he says, let's go. Because he knew that at that very moment, things were being made, plans were being made. Judas is coming up the trail. The Son of Man is about to be betrayed. And what does he do? He engages it. Because he was empowered, is empowered by the very power of Jehovah himself. And so he engaged whatever the situation was. And then number 2, skipping back then several chapters to 14. Do you know what Jesus does after he comes down out the mountain? He's been up in, remember I told you, we've got John the Baptist, we've got feeding the 5,000, we're dismissing the audience, all that stress, goes up in the mountain, he spends some time in prayer, and evidently several hours. And you know what he does when he comes down off the mountain? He realizes his folks are in trouble. And so he goes out onto the sea to take care of his people. He engaged that which was overwhelming him. One of his greatest concerns in life was that his folks would get the message and be able to dynamically carry the message after he was gone. One of his greatest concerns. And so he comes down after the moments of refreshing with his father. He comes down and he gets back after the business. He focused on God. He was alone in his focus on God. In his aloneness and focus on God, he communicated. There was both ways going on here. And once it was done, he engaged. He engaged whatever it was that was overwhelming him. Last slide. A couple nights ago, we were singing. A bunch of us mapsters, we all had gathered there in the map room, and we were singing this particular song. And one of the outstanding young ladies who's been with me for years as a mapster, and now she's one of the leaders, she pointed out the line that is underlined in the song. And it's kind of haunted me ever since she asked the question. She re-quoted the line to me, and then she said, can God really do that? Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, O Lord, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and renew a right spirit within me. Straight out of Psalm 51. But what about that line? And take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Can God do that? The psalmist would not have written it had it not been a potential. Folks, when we are overwhelmed and sinking fast, we are in perhaps the most important moment of our existence. These are key. Because you will either turn your back on God or you will reach out for Him. If you will reach out for Him, do these 4 things that Jesus demonstrated for us, He will walk through the valley with you. I didn't say the burden would be gone. He never promised us that. But He did say He would carry the burden for us. He'll walk through the valley with you. But if in the course of difficulties, being overwhelmed and sinking fast, you take your eye off of the Lord, you fail to do these 4 things, yes, He can remove His Spirit from you. Do you remember the primary reason that Jesus sent His Spirit? Why did He promise to give us the Spirit? Was it so that we'd be able to know what to preach to other people? Yes. Was it so that we'd have inspiration so that they'd write it down for us to have a Bible? Yes, but that was not the big one. You remember what He said? I'm sending you the Comforter. I'm sending you the one who can lift your burdens, walk through the valley with you. Because when you're overwhelmed and sinking fast, I got this. If you let me have it. And so those of you who are struggling, I love you. This church family loves you. We want to be there for you. But there's some things that are too big for us. Go to the Creator. He put you together. He can sustain you. We're going to sing an invitation song. If you need to respond, please do so as we stand. We are the Sonny Childs and Family Ministries, serving as missionaries to this great nation. Please pray for us and consider adding us to your missions giving.